Today, I'm going to show you how to paint an easy power weapon effect using contrast paints that can be done with just about any color. Hey folks, Corey here with Fists and Stone Wargaming. Welcome back to another how-to video. If you're interested in some more tips and tricks for your hobby projects, check out the link in the description below, and don't forget to subscribe. Now, time for power swords. Alright, taking a look at power swords. So here's a model, one of the Bladeguard Veterans I did up earlier. See, I got a nice shimmer effect, and I put some lightning stripes on there. And I'm going to do the same for this video on this Bladeguard, using the same technique. Take a look at the paints I'm going to use. The concept here is the same as the concept I used in the plasma glow video. If you haven't checked that out, there's a link in the description down below. But the idea is to use grayscale to build up the undertone, and then use a contrast paint to provide a tint for whatever color you would like right over this grayscale base coat. I'm going to grab my wet palette here. So here are the 5 colors all laid out that we're going to use the grayscale effect on. Then I'm going to use the contrast paint afterward to give it a shade. The reason to get the colors all laid out like that is so that you can easily switch back and forth between them. So I'm going to start out with a basic black to white transition on one side, and then black to white on the other side. So since I'm using 5 colors here, I'm going to lay out each one about 1/5 of the way up the sword. Quickly clean my brush off in between and just move to the next one. I'm going to start off just by locking these basically in without any real transition. You just want to get the basic idea of the color progression down. Again, kind of the same way I did the plasma glow. But for this video, I'm going to show you a way to quickly wet blend these right on the model to get a nice smooth transition. Okay, now that that side all is laid out, I'm going to lay out the other side and we'll come right back. Here's what the sword looks like after I've completed that step. You've got 5 different blocks of color running up and down the sword in the same order. So the middle of the sword kind of looks the same on both sides. But the idea here next is going to be create a gradient between each color and really kind of smooth out those transitions using some wet blending, so we don't have these very hard lines between colors. I'll do that on the bottom of the blade first and leave the top alone so that we can see the difference when they've been smoothly blended out using some wet blending versus the hard edge lines. You don't have to be perfect with this technique because we're going to put the contrast paint over the top at the end, but it will look a lot better than the hard solid lines. So I'm going to go right down. I'm going to start from dark to light. Sometimes you have to go back and forth with this. I'm going to apply a little bit of black paint to start my blend with. Rinse the brush off real quick, clean it off, grab the next color up, start to mix them a little bit, and clean the brush off again and start to blend these together. Right here in the model, this is basic wet blending. Now, I'm not using any retarder or anything. I'm using a little bit of water just to keep this on the semi-thin side. You don't want it too thin though, because it will dry out quickly. And you start to see how that looks as a transition as opposed to the hard edges on the other side. I'm going to leave this on the screen here, but I'm going to speed it up a little bit, and you can watch as I blend this all the way down the sword. And there's a look at the difference. It's not a whole lot of effort, just takes a little bit of patience and going back and forth, and you can get that kind of a gradient look. You see the big difference between the lower part of the blade and the upper part of the blade. Once you've got this grayscale gradient down, you'll be able to put whatever kind of tint over this you want. So I'm going to take the time now to go finish up the rest of the sword with this gradient, and we'll come back and start applying some contrast paint. And there's the blade all blended out. Notice it's not perfect. We're going to clean those imperfections up. We'll do some edge highlighting, and the contrast paint filter will cover some of that up as well. So now I've got some Talisar blue, which I've thinned out 50-50 with contrast medium, and I'm going to apply this to the entire blade. The important part here is to make sure that you apply this from the lighter to the darker portions of your blade, because usually when you pick the brush up, that's where the most amount of pigment is left behind. You can kind of already see how the filter works. Give this plenty of time to dry before the next step. If you like just the way it looks right now, you can certainly keep it here, but I think adding a little bit more detail is a cool next step. So I'm going to use Ulthuan Gray for both an edge highlight and to draw in some lightning. So for the edge of the sword, this is pretty easy. Just run the edge of your brush right along the edge of the sword. Give you a nice clean edge highlight. top of the blade is the tricky part. You can't really turn the brush sideways like the way we did before. You really have to go into steady hand mode, almost into eye painting mode, and try to draw a straight line right down the center of the blade. If you do make a little bit of a mistake, you can probably clean up with a little bit of that Talisar blue that you may still have sitting on your palette. Otherwise, mix up a little bit more just to kind of thin the line back down. The other thing you can do too, if you're going to create some kind of a lightning or energy arc effect, is you can use those locations on the center line as starting points for some of your energy bolts. So the first thing I'm going to do here is put a little bit of the Ulthuan Gray on the energy nodule and do a quick little highlight of the bar. You should be able to do the edge of the brush with this. And then make sure you've got some nice thin paint, nice fine point, and you can start bringing bolts out of that nodule. So I'm using that kind of a splodge area as a starting point. You can get as creative with these as you like and put them on the sword however you'd like to. I'm going to move one up the sword and give it a little bit more of an arcing feel. And I'll take it over the other side. A little dot there. Maybe make this one a fork actually. And then to me, the top of the blade is looking a little lonely, so I'm going to stretch one arc across up here. The last thing you can do is create some kind of a streak effect. Get some nice thin Ulthuan Gray on your brush and just pick an angle. I'm going to pick this angle right here. And just really gently nick at the edge of the blade. So there's a quick, easy way of doing power swords with contrast paints using any color over a grayscale base coat. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.